This is Lecture 2, Disability and Design. Disabilities are nothing new in the history of the human race, nor is the wish that we can provide an accommodation for the people with disabilities. What we're going to look at in this particular lecture are some of the things that have been designed to allow people to function despite a disability, or in many cases to mask what that disability is. Prosthetics is about creating something that can replace a missing part of a human body. Obviously, prosthetic limbs are the most common example of this, but they're not the only example. Missing body parts might be due to a congenital disorder or through trauma or disease, such as diabetes or bone cancer. The history of prosthetics goes back to prehistory, with various attempts of, for example, providing someone with an artificial leg. But it also has included glass eyes. For example, Sammy Davis Jr. is famous for having a glass eye after an automobile accident he was in. A metal nose, for example, such as Tycho Brahe wore after he lost his own nose in a duel. And as I mentioned before, artificial limbs. Gottfried von Berlichingen zu Hornberg, and I apologize if my pronunciation isn't completely correct, was a knight of the Holy Roman Empire in the 15th century. During the War of the Succession of Landshut, he fought for the Baron of Bavaria, and during the siege of Landshut, he lost his right arm at the wrist when cannon fire forced his sword against him. He eventually had two iron hands made. The first was a simple one made by a local blacksmith, but the second one was capable of holding objects, and it allowed him to continue his military career. Both hands still exist and are on display at the Burg Jagdhausen, and again I apologize for my poor pronunciation, a medieval castle in Germany. You can see his more famous hand in this slide. Tycho Brahe was a Danish astronomer in the late 16th century, early 17th century. When he was in school at the University of Rostock, he studied medicine, and along the way, he got into a duel with a fellow Danish nobleman who happened to be his third cousin. In that duel, he lost his nose, part of his nose. What you're looking at in this slide is a replica of the artificial nose that Tycho wore to cover the part of his nose that he lost. Obviously, this probably looked better than his partially severed nose did. Peter Stuyvesant was the last Director General of the New Netherlands, a Dutch colony in what is currently New York City in New York State. He lost his right leg as a result of an injury during a battle to reclaim the island of St. Martin, which the Spanish had taken from the Dutch. As a result of the injury, he had his right leg amputated below the knee. He ended up replacing it with a wooden peg with silver nails within it. Stuyvesant also was not a religious pluralist, and as a matter of fact, ran into conflict with Lutherans, Jews, Roman Catholics, and Quakers after he became the Director General of New Netherlands. In the slide, what you see is a statue of Stuyvesant that was placed at Stuyvesant Square in New York City. Peter Stuyvesant was the last Director General of the New Netherlands, a Dutch colony in what is currently New York City in New York State. He lost his right leg as a result of an injury during a battle to reclaim the island of St. Martin, which the Spanish had taken from the Dutch. As a result of the injury, he had his right leg amputated below the knee. He ended up replacing it with a wooden peg with silver nails within it. Stuyvesant also was not a religious pluralist, and as a matter of fact, ran into conflict with Lutherans, Jews, Roman Catholics, and Quakers after he became the Director General of New Netherlands. In the slide, what you see is a statue of Stuyvesant that was placed at Stuyvesant Square in New York City. This slide shows a close-up of the statue, so you can more clearly see the peg that replaced his lower right leg. There are several issues that come up when you are looking to design a prosthesis. First of all, it has to be able to be attached to the body. Most artificial limbs require something that they can attach to. So in the case of an artificial arm, that means basically that you can place it over what remains of the arm in the first place. In the case of an artificial leg or an artificial foot, it means you have to account for shock absorption, which is something that'll happen with every step that the person using it takes. In the case of artificial hands and arms, there is issues of dexterity. I had a student many years ago at St. Peter's College who did not have a fully developed left arm. He had a device that he wore over it with a hook at the end, and the way he opened and closed the hook was by shrugging his shoulder a particular way. Cosmesis refers to the disguising of injuries and disfigurements by means of things like this. What you're looking at here is an artificial leg. And the question that comes up is, would someone prefer to have this look more like a regular human leg than the prosthesis that it is? This is an issue of where cosmesis comes in, making the prosthetic look like the real thing. Not all prosthetics are equal. The example that you see here is an artificial leg that clearly doesn't look anything like a real human leg does. However, in this particular case, it helps the man you see in the figure run faster and more easily than if he had a standard prosthesis. Athletes in Paralympics and events like that would frequently use legs like this for exactly that reason. Are they for general purpose? And the answer clearly is no. But in this case, for the athletic event that the man is involved in, it does the job very nicely. Artificial arms have gotten a lot more advanced as time has gone on. The arm that you see here is an example of an artificial limb that replaces the lost function and improved mobility of individuals with issues with upper limbs. In a case like this, and this arm can be very expensive, it provides him with a mechanism, so a myoelectric device, so that it can be controlled by the muscles in the remainder of the arm. This becomes another step forward and gives someone who's lost a limb a lot more mobility in that limb than they would have otherwise. A bath chair or a bath wheelchair is an ancestor of sorts of the modern wheelchair. It derived its name from its invention in the English city of Bath. It could seat one person who presumably had difficulty walking, and it had a folding hood that could keep rain or snow off the individual riding in it. It could be drawn by a horse or donkey, or alternatively, it could be pushed by a person walking behind it. Unlike modern wheelchairs, it could not be moved by the person in the chair, at least not easily. It also allowed the person riding in it to steer, as you can see from the steering stick it has in front. Everest and Jennings were the first company to mass produce wheelchairs. Herbert Everest and Harry Jennings were friends, and both were engineers. Everett needed a wheelchair after a mining accident and complained to his friend Jennings about his difficulties with the wheelchairs that he had used. This led the two of them to develop a lightweight, collapsible wheelchair. It was patented in 1937, and eventually became the largest manufacturer of wheelchairs in the world. In 1996, the company was sold to Gramfield Health Products, which still sells wheelchairs under the Everest Jennings name. An early motorized wheelchair was invented by Levitt Luzerne Custer in 1919 at the Dayton Soldiers' Home in Dayton, Ohio, to help wounded World War I veterans. The first electric powered wheelchair to be put into production was invented by George Klein, who worked for the National Research Council of Canada to assist injured veterans after World War II. In 1956, Everest and Jennings became the company that was the first to manufacture the electric wheelchair on a mass scale. Being motorized, these chairs can be moved by its passenger far more easily than a standard wheelchair can, although they are much more expensive. They give a greater degree of freedom to many people who need a wheelchair to get around. While President Franklin Delano Roosevelt had lost most of the use of his legs due to polio, it didn't stop him from running for governor in New York State, serving as governor, and running and serving as president. When he wore the heavy braces that allowed him to stand, he could walk short distances by rotating his body around and swinging one of his two legs in front of him while being supported by someone else, most frequently his son James. But for most day to day tasks, he relied on the wheelchair shown on this slide. Given the place of the large front wheels, he could easily roll himself around. Roosevelt's reliance on a wheelchair was not publicized during his lifetime, as there was a stigma of weakness and instability associated with any disability. However, historians and some disability rights advocates wanted his disability to be shown for historical accuracy and to tell the story of what they believed to be the source of his strength. However, the memorial that President Bill Clinton dedicated did not show FDR in a wheelchair. Members of the Roosevelt family and others had argued that FDR would not have wished to be represented as such. This was clearly true. Roosevelt went to great lengths to hide his disability. There have been several efforts to make it possible for wheelchair bound people to be able to effectively stand. Most of these have involved what is a wheelchair that can raise a disabled person to their normal standing height. The iBot shown on this slide is one such example. White canes have become standard equipment for the blind. Here are 10 quirky facts about them. Yes, it is legal to take a white cane through security at an airport, according to the Transportation Security Administration, but it has to go through the x ray machine. White canes are white because of George A. Bonham. A white cane makes it easier to see a blind person crossing a street at night. White canes are going high tech. Inventors in India, the United Kingdom, and France have equipped white canes with ultrasonic devices that detect objects up to 9 feet away. The standard technique for using a white cane is the Hoover method, developed by Richard Hoover. Only 2 to 8% of people who are visually impaired use a white cane. The rest rely on their usable vision, a guide dog, or a sighted guide. There are actually three different kinds of white canes. There's the standard mobility cane used to navigate. there's the support cane, used by people with visual impairments who also have mobility challenges. And then there's the ID cane, a small foldable cane used by people with partial sight to let others know they have a visual impairment. Unless you're willing to walk the walk, you can't become a certified orientation and mobility specialist. O&M specialists teach white cane technique to people who are blind. But to become certified, you must spend at least 120 hours blindfolded, navigating with the white cane. Today's modern lightweight canes are usually made from aluminum, fiberglass, or carbon fiber and can weigh as little as 7 ounces. Some white cane users prefer straight canes, which are more durable, while others prefer collapsible canes, which can be folded and stored more easily. White caning can be fun. The Braille Institute sponsors an annual cane quest where youngsters aged 3 through 12 compete to quickly and safely navigate a route in their community using their white canes. The contest helps kids master proper white cane techniques and encourages independence. In some states, it's illegal for a person who is not legally blind to use a white cane to gain right of way while crossing a street. Get caught in Florida, for example, and you'll face second-degree misdemeanor charges and up to 60 days in prison. In 1268, Roger Bacon made the earliest recorded comment on the use of lenses for optical purposes, but magnifying lenses inserted in frames were used for reading both in Europe and China at this time. In Europe, eyeglasses first appeared in Italy, their introduction being attributed to Alessandro di Spina of Florence. In 1784, Benjamin Franklin invented bifocals, dividing his lenses for distant and near vision, the split parts being held together by the frame. Cemented bifocals were invented in 1884, and the fused and one-piece types followed in 1908 and 1910, respectively. Contact lenses are thin artificial lenses worn on the surface of the eye to correct refractive defects of vision. The first contact lens, made of glass, was developed by Adolf Fick in 1887 to correct irregular astigmatism. Why do people choose to wear contact lenses instead of glasses? One difference right away is that you have a complete field of vision that is corrected, something you don't necessarily have with glasses. Many other people choose to wear it for aesthetic reasons, that it looks better than they feel they look in glasses. There have been many attempts over the years to come up with devices that can help improve hearing. One of the earlier ones, dating back at least to the 18th century, is the ear trumpet. Ear trumpets do not amplify sound, but they funnel it so that there is more sound coming to the ear from the larger portion of the horn on the outside to the smaller portion that's actually inside someone's ear. Early hearing aids used carbon transmitters like those used in telephones to provide amplification to 15 decibels, about half of what is normally needed. These hearing aids were in use from 1902 until the vacuum tube hearing aids came out. Vacuum tube hearing aids could increase sound levels up to 70 decibels, far more than is needed. These first appeared in 1924, with hearable hearing aids coming out in 1938. In 1952, transistor technology came to hearing aids, with 200,000 sold in 1953 alone. The first fully digital hearing aid came out in 1996, and they keep getting better. One of the things this allows for is the fact that hearing loss is not across the entire spectrum of sound. The digital hearing aids can be programmed so that they increase volume on the portion of the sound spectrum that people are having difficulty hearing. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany was born with a serious defect. A motor nerve to his left arm was damaged during birth, and it stunted the growth of his left arm and limited his use of it. He had his clothing tailored to draw attention away from his useless and shorter arm. Virtually every photograph of him shows his right arm bent so he could hold his left hand in his right hand, which minimized the appearance of the difference in length of his two arms. You can see this clearly in this picture. This is a trick that he mastered at a young age, as you can see in this picture. The camera angle also helps in making his right arm look the same length as his left. After the Kaiser was forced to abdicate at the end of World War I in 1918, he took up residence in the town of Doorn in the Dutch province of Utrecht. You can see in this picture that he almost automatically poses to hide the length of his left arm, which in this picture is covered by his right.